It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Tice Cin and Lola Olufemi here to discuss Tice's debut novel, Keeping the House. And just to introduce the speakers a bit, Tice is an interdisciplinary artist from North London. A London Writers' Award winner, her work has been published by Extra Teeth and Skin Deep, and commissioned by places like Battersea Art Centre and St Paul's Cathedral. An alumnus of Barbican Young Poets, she now creates digital art as part of Design Yourself, a collective based at the Barbican Centre, exploring what it means to be human when technology is changing everything. A producer and DJ, she's releasing an EP, Keeping the House, to accompany her novel. And the chair for tonight is Lola Olufemi. Lola is a black feminist writer and researcher from London. Her work focuses on the use of feminist imagination and its relationship to cultural production, political demand and futurity. She's the author of Feminism Interrupted, which was published by Pluto in 2020, Experiments in Imagining Otherwise, which is forthcoming from her Jar Press this year, and she's a member of the Bare Minimum, an interdisciplinary anti-work arts collective. So we're going to start with a reading and then discussion, and then we'll go to audience Q&A at the end. So we just ask that when you're formulating your questions that they are actually questions rather than comments. And if you just make sure your phones are turned off, books will be on sale at the end, and there should be time for a signing as well. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Tice and Lola.
From a section of the book, and then we're going to talk for about maybe 30-40 minutes, and then go to audience questions, and another reading maybe towards the end if we have time. So I'll pass on to you.
Thank you. They only just got me to stop crying. It's been like a kind of a slow type of tear, them ones. But I'm really humbled by everyone being here today. I really appreciate it. I thought that I would start off with a scene in the book that I suppose pivots us into an absence that we feel throughout the entire book. Something a little bit clubby for you. Bread Knives and Little Hills, 2007. A Peugeot 106 laid a trail for another car to follow. It set off loudly down Tottenham High Road, 4 men inside, rattling past the police station before people lost sight of it. Earlier in the night, these 4 men had waved 1 ticket at Bouncer, demanding 4 for 1 entry. They promised that with them inside, the whole place would light up. One of the men spoke in the riddles of Baha'i. With each of the bouncer's rejections, his concentration broke and came back in. Gradually, his fingers carved through the air, sharp, deliberate. He stood in a halo of smoke, watched by girls in little heels and jeans, holding cigarettes in their hands, mouths ajar. Inside, the dance floor was carpeted, and it smelled of peppermint. It was ravey, with an hour in the middle for a cypher, focus turning. When the beat shifts into another wave, you have to catch the moment where your moving changes and correct yourself. Dancing as exercise. Carry on till you're gasping, water, elbow tappers popping up, cups of water, second-hand flavour, bit of a twist. I learned not to breathe as I sipped at strange glasses. Otherwise, I begin to picture the gaping, moustached mouth that might have hovered over the same glass earlier. The tongue that may have rested on the rim of the cup, or the fingers that touched the sides, warm from the iced urinals. Outside, the boys were still trying to get in. One was offended by his treatment, with each look hot, then cold. He kept his feet fidgeting while he reached into his pocket and took out a bread knife. The serrated edges slid back and forth into the bouncer's stomach, tugging at sinew and detaching flesh from bone. As though peeling away, his body folded into an S shape, head onto the pavement. The man slipped his weapon away and sprinted back to his car. Ducking out through the same fire exit we'd used to sneak into the building, we managed to avoid the rush. I saw one of my friends disappear in the panic, throwing out his fist to keep him from standing. He reappeared later to meet us in McDonald's waiting for warmth. Adrenaline sat in my mouth. I drank strawberry milkshake and let it rest coldly each time before swallowing. It was Jemila's last week in London and she wouldn't stop eating. I kept telling her there's a McDonald's in North Cyprus, but she told me the meat tasted different there and pulled apart the chicken nuggets to show me. I counted the number of homeless people buying a burger from the Savour menu and finishing them before they reached the door. On the walk home, someone threw trainers into a tree and ran into a house. They hung there until the neoprene sheen faded. These trainers marked the distance I'd left to travel home, the last quarter of my walk. And of course, I always thought that night when I saw them hanging there. The night the bouncer was attacked. Club at 16. Jemila's bitten nails. Chicken into thumb-sized pieces. Jamila eating with her eyes closed, cheeks fatter than before. Little groups, shivering tables, recounting, folding money, fragmenting cycles, making sense. It was this too, and it was this. Eavesdrop so much you think you saw it. Dancing during knives. Eavesdrop so good you tell it better yourself. Eyes closed in McDonald's, tired chicken face. Retell it so it's yours. And it's yours now. And it's yours now.
I first kind of want to say I love this book so much, and it is such a joy to ask you questions about it. And I think maybe we should start with the idea of absence. And I guess my first question, I wanted you to talk to me a bit about form, because I feel like this novel is trying to tell, multiple stories through memory, and lots of things, it feels as you're reading it, they come into view and they disappear. There's lots we don't know, there's lots we have to kind of infer. And so, why this kind of experimental form? Why the use of poetry? Why the fragmentary way of telling this story, I guess?
There are so many reasons why I think we fragment within writing that I could give as well. One of the ones that I give when I think about this is or I'll give to myself more it's the first time. When you have complex PTSD, the way you tell stories is different, because you're this, boom, 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 this happened, that happened, and then but also when I was eating chicken yesterday, and then I wanted to kind of have that feeling of the way that our mind remaps us, and suddenly you're in a computer game where you fell into a little portal and then you popped up. I wanted to have this type of feeling with the writing, because I think it helped me make sense of myself, my loved ones, people that I've come across, the things I've seen on TV, which I wanted to kind of put into a book format, I think a lot about those portals and jump cuts in our minds, and I think form felt like the safest way to try that on, moving into poetry when I felt like writing a big chunk of text was too difficult. All right, right now I can give you 4 words in a poem then, right now I can like quote you a song that I heard on Deja, you know what I mean? I can give you this, I can't do this right now, I can do this. And I think it's, my hope is that it's some type of a gentle offering to the reader that as well, where they feel like if one moment is high intensity, we can travel into something else.
I feel like also it's interesting that you talk about, you know, how our minds process different types of trauma, because I feel like so much of this book deals with histories of violence and how histories of violence meet one another, like what happens to Jamila at the beginning of the book. I guess I wanted to ask about how you write violence, right? And how you do justice to people who have been hurt by structures, who have been hurt by each other, in a way that isn't so kind of obvious, right? In a way that doesn't make violence grotesque. And I think that's something that this book does so well. It shows us as readers the kind of urgency of this violence and how life-changing it is, but also it doesn't do that in a way that undermines the impact that it has on the characters. So when you're writing things like sexual violence, for example, when you're exploring these memories with these characters, I guess what was your experience trying to do that in a way that doesn't obscure, you know?
I wanted to try to, when I look at a character, I look at say 6 elements of them, and I want to give them all equal love. Things have different effects upon us and definitely not equal effects upon us, but I think it's the writer's job to linger and do things in a way that I think pays respect to what has happened to people. And I want to show respect to my characters. I see them, you know, I don't see them as divorced from myself in a sense of like, this is a character, this is a page, I'm gonna like mash them up now, do you know? I know that when people read a book, they see themselves in it. And so, just as you're talking with somebody in a room, you'd want to be speaking respectfully to them in a room. So I was trying to do that within the book. Something that I found is a more achievable way of doing that was just to make sure that joy is felt throughout the book as many times as I could. Wherever I saw a pocket where I could just like show people joy, I really wanted to do that too. You know, just as I wanted us to show some of the formative, horrible things that happened to Jamila, I wanted us to like see her like whining at a party. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted this type of feeling of just people's exuberances. So I think so often in literature and film and news, people are reduced to what happened to them, what happened to their communities, and then that kind of becomes the marker you want to carry yourself with the whole way of your journey. And I think that's not like, you know, we've got to do more for our communities when we're writing about them, and especially when we're writing about communities that we love and admire but are not specifically within, I think.
And yeah, I guess on the question of community, that leads us, I guess, to contextualize the book a little bit for lots of people who haven't read it. So 2 questions. How would you explain this book to somebody who hasn't read it? Because I think it's difficult actually to kind of sum up what's going on, and we can kind of get onto all of the hidden bits like later. And 2, talk to me about community, talk to me about place. I think even if memory is sketchy in places, even if the form is fragmentary, what's really clear throughout the book is that we're in a specific location. And that's like really exciting as a fellow North Londoner, when, you know, these places are named. I feel like often so many contemporary novels are concerned with abstraction, and this is like, no, this is a specific, we're talking about West Green Road, we're talking about like, you know, Broadwater Farm, and that feels, it makes the novel feel rooted. So I guess, very long 2 questions, but talk to me about those two things. If you forget what I said, just ask.
Thank you. But also, if I start going off on a tangent, I love being specific, because I feel like you've got to say things with your chest. Like, you have to say them quite, well, you don't have to, but for me, I found that it was lovely. I wanted to plant every place that I was struck by from both the outside and within in this book. So on that note of like, you know, I know like West Green Roads, But some of these spaces I'm talking about, I wouldn't have been like chilling in there with these geezers. So I see this book as a tour guide by a slightly cheeky person in terms of like they tell you like the truth and then they'll swip it with a lie. Through North London, through Tottenham more like, and they've somehow brought us in on this journey, and it's come into the North London heroin trades. It's like, how has this happened, and why is this so logistical? And I think people, when they write about drugs, they don't think about the logistics. Well, they're not offered the space to write about the logistics in a big way. Because other publishers I've spoken to, for example, they definitely wanted me to like get rid of some of those details. Where I was like, no, if you want to like grow heroin inside this, you need to like this is going to be the fertilizer you've got to use. These types of things. So it's I would like this project to hopefully inspire other people to go into the nitty gritty. Get into the logistics, point out the road if you want to. And yeah, I think not shy away from that and not think, oh, it's boring, or because I'm from North London, someone from Sheffield might not get it. And it's like, well, that's really not the case. I think communities repeat themselves. And, you know, like when I was speaking to Jav from Our Novel Stories, and she's saying that she's where she grew up, it reminds her very much of Tottenham, the way I wrote about it, which was really nice. One of I heard these things, I was like, I've got to go with them, they are the best. I was like, so you're an indie publisher as well? Like, yes, please. I don't want to kill the
fly.
Yeah, I hope you like that line. I'll just be doing this occasionally. You won't be murdered on site.
Yeah.
It's alright, I think it's like a relative from the sky. Oh, that was me.
I wanted to ask then also about the symbol of the cabbage, I guess, because you are very specific about, you know, where heroin comes from. And I think about the point in the novel when one of the characters is trying to like sell heroin to these like middle class like white boys. And I think it's really interesting because we as the readers have seen the route that this, you know, product has taken from across borders, how it's been carefully thought about, how it's been packaged, how people have done the logistics of how it's going to get, you know, across the border. But I guess there's also, so there's something in there about like, you know, routes of exploitation, but also I think there's something in the novel consistently, and maybe you can speak to this, about like the earth and soil and planting and kind of growth. And so I guess for you, what does the symbol of the cabbage mean, and how did you use that to structure a novel that I think is in lots of ways like a cabbage, very layered, you know, like very, you kind of have to open it up to get to like the central thing that you want, right?
Thank you. When I was writing the book, I drew a cabbage and I put like different bits of the plot within different leaves, and then slowly started to try and bash it together. And I used to kick myself when I was in the uni library. I didn't have a laptop at the time, so I was writing it there, a lot of it anyway. Because I was really hungry, I wanted to go home, and I'd set myself these challenges that were a bit like annoying, and I thought maybe slightly pretentious, you know, like giving yourself, you know, you got to write as if you're a cabbage. Are you the cabbage? Is the cabbage this? I think there's an element of the pretentious that I love to explore as well. Like being at UCL and the conversations we were having, and one of them ended up in the book in a way, like the ghettoization of academia. And I was like, what? That is a weird term. But I think coming out of this, in this context, is a weird term. And I feel like, a friend of mine called Mandisa, they're always saying how, you know, like when you use certain words, like I'm going to bring you back onto this word. Like, do you actually want to use this word? Are you comfortable saying it? And I think there's this thing as well, like with drugs at uni, and just like seeing the way that people are very disrespectful towards drug dealers there. And I think that it's so laced in vitriol in a way that feels racially charged, classist, and deeply it makes no sense, you know, it makes no sense because like these are people that are aware of what they're partaking in and they're doing it for their very reasons, do you know what I mean? Like reasons that you would never come to within your field of reference, so why judge? And yeah, I guess there's a chapter in this book called Supermarket Academic, and that was my moment to kind of unpick those hypocrisies that you find when you're studying and in any professional environment, especially as like a woman of colour. I think, yeah, I really wanted to like gun for that then.
I guess, yeah, and I think just to kind of respond to what you said, I think often when people are thinking about drugs or whatever, it's often in a very individual way. They don't think of the underside, or they don't think of, you know, the routes through which the substance gets to them, like how the labor that's required in getting them that kind of like party drug, I guess. Another question just came to me instead of the one I was going to ask, which is then how do you feel about this novel being kind of positioned purely as like a crime novel, purely as a kind of piece of genre fiction, which I think does this novel a disservice because I think it's doing something much more interesting than just like showing us the underworld of like the heroin trade, you know?
It's I think it's interesting because like the way that we market any product, you're like, when you sit down, you like, you know, if you've got a small business, you've got to think, all right, how have I got to pitch this? Like, how have I got to bring this out? And you can't, often it's hard to say 5 things in one sentence, right? But on the same level, I've been more comfortable with certain people calling it a crime novel than others. Like, yeah, call it a crime novel if you love the genre. You know? If you don't despise The Sopranos, yeah, call it a crime novel. But, we gotta love The Sopranos. If you know, I've had people message me already, and the book's not out yet, and I'm very, very humbled by this. Like, someone messaged me from prison saying he's heard about the book and he's waiting for it to arrive, and that really like, it made me feel a certain kind of way. And I think in that way, if the term crime novel attracts readers who wouldn't pick up a book that was described as literary fiction told from a young woman's perspective, heavily influenced by her time at UCL. Do you know, it's why not? So I think we have to be mindful of who labels it, how often we're labeling it that way, and when I label it myself, I keep calling it a Trojan horse, the book, where I've used the Cabbage concepts to try and like put more stories into it than what someone might normally pick up a book called Keeping the House for, I guess. So.
I think also on the question of audience as well, another like formal kind of question about the glossing. I think that's really interesting, and that's like something that I haven't seen before in a book. So like if you open the book, there are lots of bits of the book where specific terms or phrases are explained to the audience because they're in a different language. And I guess, why the glossing? Because I'm interested in what was so great about this novel is I think it asks the audience to do hard work. It asks them to like go and look up the names of specific places that they might not know, or like wars or invasions, right? People are so used to having everything kind of translated for them. And so talk to me about that process. Was that something that you always knew you wanted, character names, like different, or was that something that you wanted in the book, or did that kind of emerge in the editing? Did people say, it's important for our audience to know what you mean when you use this very specific phrase, specific to this community or that community, etc.?
There were times where which you might find when you're reading them, where things go untranslated. And fortunately not with my editor and publisher, that they very much respected where I wanted to translate and where I didn't, and I went with a publisher that work on translations mostly. So that conversation didn't really come up, but in the lead up to it, in the amount of publishers I spoke to beforehand, they were like, oh, you need to make this all English. We get that you're like trying to do that thing, you know? You're trying to spice it up a bit. I was like, well, I don't think I'm, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't put Turkish in to spice it up. It's not musical. It's just had to be said in that sentence. And sometimes I really want people to know what that sentence is because I want to bring you in. And sometimes I don't want to bring you in, and so I won't. And there's this Emma at End of a Story. She was saying it feels like someone whispering in your ear at a party, and you're like, aha, okay, yeah, I get this now. And I really like the thought of that because for the people who want to read that, I would have said that to them in person. There are other languages in the book, for example, it's Slovak, and I wanted to be really mindful of using languages that weren't ones that I spoke. So it very much was coming back to things where I had close relatives who I got to speak and sit down with and be like, okay, are you all right with this? And how do you feel about this term going in? And how do you feel about this thing being translated? Because sometimes when you describe something to somebody, you're giving away a community secret. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to give away community secrets without knowing the charge of what I was putting to page. Some things will transpire over time, where I'm like, I probably shouldn't have written that. But at the time, I felt really aware of these things, I think.
Yeah, I think also it's about who you're seen by and for what purpose. That's definitely the sense that I got when I was reading the novel, is like somebody will read this and just know it's written for a specific kind of person, right? You're writing to somebody, and when you're an audience member that's not from said community that the book is written for, quote unquote, there is the work that you have to do to understand that actually this is not about you, you know, like something else is happening here, I guess. I wanted to talk maybe like this, if we have some time, like zero in on specific characters, and I think we see a lot of the book through Damla, like the kind of main character, the daughter. But I think for me, the character that I found most interesting, or that kind of like centered the novel, was Ayla, like her mother. Because you don't think of your mum as somebody who is like pushing heroin. And I think you did a really good job of, you know, building up a sense of, you know, a dutiful mother, or like what a mother should be, and then completely kind of collapsing that. So I guess talk to me about that.
So disclaimer, she does it in real life, that is. Ayla's character, I loved writing her because I loved the time periods that she spans in her character, and I loved writing about, you know, Tottenham in that time, and, you know, from like 1987 onwards. And I think when I think about Ayla's character, I think about someone who does what needs to get done for her family, and that is necessary, you know? It's necessary, and it's not so awful as well. I think sometimes, you know, when people say, oh, it's all or nothing, I had to do this, otherwise, like, my house would have fallen down on me, that kind of thing. Yeah, Isla is in a desperate sense of, like, urgency, but, you know, she still drinks tea and has, like, a cleaning routine, and she has an ant infestation and she has to put it out and these things. And I think sometimes when people write about poverty or being forced to make tough choices, they or talk about it, not just write about it, like the way we think about it, we forget that like life does still go on throughout all of this. You've got to raise your daughters, you've got to clean, you've got to like go out, find a new dress, you've got to go to this club and get there on time, what is on time, and you know, this kind of thing. I think we've all got different ideas of what is time here. So yeah, I hope that comes across with her character. And just in general, this sense that, you know, somebody asked me in the lead up to publication, she said, do you think that you're luxuriating over drugs? Do you think that you're making them glamorous with the way that you're portraying them, the way that Isla is such a glamorous character? And I don't think I am glamorizing drugs. There's nothing to, in the book, there's nothing to glamorize. It's just, you look at this world, this is my version of the mirror that I've fictionalized and smashed up and put back in place, and now this is what you're going to see. And you can describe to yourself whether you think it's glamorous, whether you think it's terribly triggering in certain senses, and then please turn the page and this kind of thing. That I think readers make a decision, / listeners and talkers.
I think also it makes us rethink, you know, the concept of the criminal, right? Like what the criminal looks like, how they operate, because I think your average reader has a specific idea of like what we think of people who commit crimes as like inherently like bad people, right? And I think what Isla's character does is muddy and complicate that, right? You show her in all of her different elements. I guess also I wanted to ask, throughout the book there is this generational thread, because we also get some glimpses into you know, Isla's mother and how she is carrying trauma in her body as well, how she's kind of dealing with the effects of the things that have happened to her. I think so many characters in this book have physical responses to the things that that have happened to them. I think of Makbule and her like varicose veins. That's something that like comes up all the time in the way that you describe her. So the description is often like quite visceral. So I guess talk to me about like embodying trauma, or embodying, you know, the carrying in your body the things that have happened to you for these characters.
I loved writing about Makbule because, to go back to an earlier question of yours to tie into this with, she's someone that puts her foot in the land, and that affects her legs. You know, some of varicose veins comes from like, you know, the pressures of like standing all those long hours. And dampness and the way that your blood circulation changes. And then I was thinking about stress and how that exacerbates these things. And cabbages get quite stressed out. Cabbages have loads of like personality seeming traits, and they become more veiny if they've been put through more trying weather. And I thought that was really interesting in terms of like talking about like us as people, and then the way that the land kind of mimics us. You know, they say when you sit next to your dog, you start to look like the dog. But so maybe like we're starting to be like cabbages sitting next to them or something. I'd rather look like a cabbage flower, I have to say. But.
I guess also then talk to me about Jamila and Damla's relationship as well, because I think that these are two characters that they grow up together, and in the span of the novel we see how they view each other, but we also see all of these kind of like really soft, tender moments between them, and there's a specific kind of love there. There's a way that they know each other which becomes apparent towards the end of the novel. And I guess what were you trying to do there? How are you trying to think about the ways these characters follow each other through their lives?
You know, sometimes in life when you feel like you've seen someone so many times within your existence, probably more than they remember being in the same room as you, that kind of became a thread in the book for me. This connection that isn't easy to prove. It's formed by a few very crucial moments that, especially when you've had a life that's been quite busy, those moments of pureness that come through, I think, become even more important. And so with Jamila and Damla, I wanted to have this sense that they've had this connection, they've known each other from young, and to this moment at the end of the book, let's say. And yet, it's not highly easy to measure by number. It's easy to measure by a mood. You know? When I looked at the relationship between Jamila and Damla, I saw them cast in blue, and that they were like moving towards each other in these shapes and spaces. And I think that's a massive comfort with people when we've like been through certain things, and we then position a person in our life to have that type of sense of treasure within yourself. And especially with complex PTSD, the way it ripples your mind and your memories, and so the things that do make their way through, and the things that return themselves to you that are positive, they're extra precious, I think.
Yeah, I think that there are also so many like soft moments kind of between them, and I remember there's this bit where you maybe say something like, oh, like I move my hand and I get a kiss for it, and I don't know, there's something there, I guess, between the two of you. I guess I'm hearing you when you say that they're moving towards each other, and they always in the novel seem to be circling each other in some sense, right? And they seem to have, you know, a deeper understanding of each other's, you know, lives and what each other has kind of gone through. I also wanted to ask, I was saying to Sarah before we started talking that there are so many parts of this novel that feel like a play. Like when we're in the hall with the men, when we're in the like social spaces and all the men are like talking at once, you're really good actually at writing men. And so I wanted to ask about that. They seem I say that to say they seem so familiar. They seem like, oh, you like growing up working class as well, you know that kind of boy and you forgive him so many things, right? And yeah, so talk to me about, you know, writing this big cast of characters, all of these men who are terrible in lots of ways, but also like brothers, or feel like brothers, you know.
Something I was thinking about with regards to like the characters in the book and their genders was I felt like I paid them all the same love. I definitely, not all of them, there are some that you'll see that I really hate. But like even with like the calf scenes where it's like geezers talking and you'd think it would be a space that like the main character Damla wouldn't be able to exist within. I was really interested in seeing how the child comes from under the table and they've heard this whole thing and the way that these people will then deal with it and be like, oh, she was there this whole time. Some of the book was formed by interviews that I then broke up and farmed out to different characters, and so when we hear the voices in the book, I don't know how comfortable I feel saying that they're all my voice. I think whenever we tell a story between ourselves, there's always this presence of a third, fourth, fifth voice that comes in, and I wanted that feeling of the interview to come through. I kind of wanted it to feel like a radio play, you know, when people are like going back and forth. But that's probably the music background, I think, because I love the way that music can like just jump cut you. You know, at the beginning of a song, you'll hear like a refrain, and it would just be, and it'll be like a mum on the phone. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, at the moment, I think especially in like UK rap, we're getting like this surge of like voice notes at the beginning of songs, and it's I wonder when we will be tired of the voice notes. I like them, but so I think about that. I think about the way that those voices can just have a sense of outer bodiness to them, where they're like, oh, this feels a bit strangely real, and I wonder why it does.
Yeah, I think I have more questions, but I'm conscious of time and want people to be able to ask their own questions. And so I'll end on the idea that, sorry, I'm just thinking about what my end should be. Two things are in my mind. One, I love it when poets write novels because they always do really interesting things with the form. I think what this novel like really showed me is that you can just like, you know, it feels like looking through glass in a way, right? But like still, but without the kind of denseness and like totality of like narrative. That's what it feels like, which was exciting. But then I guess I also, on a different, that was just a compliment, on a different end, I wanted to ask about precariousness. I think what runs through this novel is that all of the communities that you're talking about are precariously situated, they're working class, and I think when you grow up working class, there's a specific, and you quote unquote escape that life, right, through the lie of meritocracy. You go to university or you get a job or you whatever. There's this kind of lingering ache, I think, for all of the people that didn't make it out of this specific place. And that's how I felt when I was reading this book, that so many people, so many of the characters, their lives are limited by, you know, structures. And I guess I wanted you to talk about that a little bit, if that makes sense to you.
I'm so happy you brought that up. So So this book, it is a product, right? I watched some Jay-Z documentary when I was, I think, 20, and he was just like saying how you got to find your product and then use it to finesse yourself into a position where you can then start to bring your community up with you. And I just had it in my brain, and I was like, all right, well, I can't sing, and poetry doesn't make much money. Let me write a novel. Let me try to write a novel. So I started the novel. Loads of people were like, you can't be writing a novel, not you. There's all these very same structures are in place that made it very difficult to get to this point. And now that I'm at this point, I wanted to demonstrate that quite broadly inside the book with the supermarket academic chapter, to show the way that these stories become. I think. I'm by no means dismissing academia. I love to go into UCL, I have to say.
No, dismiss it.
I'm definitely dismissing big parts of it.
Absolutely.
That the structures that weren't designed for people, and the universities that won't give you a bursary, and these things that slow us down. And so I wanted to show that sometimes, if you were a big kingpin back in your day, you might end up as a butcher. And you're probably going to see him every time you go to get your meat. And it's just a thing. It's just a thing, and if you're from the areas that we know, if you're from ends, that's not a surprise. That's not glamorizing, it's just the way things are. And there's no feeling of some people, they can never get out. Their name's been marked by certain people within the field, and then that's it. They won't be able to get out. And then there are some who class climb, isn't it? And the self-made heroes, we say. And I think there's a lot of pressure put on people to make themselves and do it all themselves, and say that they didn't receive any help, because I think we want to position ourselves as so far from the people that didn't struggle, for a reason that why go through all that struggle if you can't, if the people just don't see it. It's really hard. It's really hard to then just say, oh, right, now I've reached where you are, we're just like each other. No, that's not the aim. The aim is to get out of poverty, right? And the aim is to help people in the ways that you can. And I think that some of it is about knowledge, about showing that there are other options, and showing that we definitely have these this massive well of light in these communities. We're not trying to escape from them, we're just trying to help them. We're not trying to flip it over and put a new building, something like this. Not some Neapolitan ice cream building that's been chopped down.
No to gentrification. A great place to end. Thank you so much for listening to us. Half an hour for questions. Did you want to read just quickly from another bit of the book, and then we can give some people some time to think about questions and not comments, and we can come back to you.
Okay. Do you guys want one of the calf scenes or one of the girl scenes? I'm curious. Maybe I'll give you a calf scene. I'll give it a Turkish. Tomorrow. Nehir supermarket has been named after a river. The vegetables are old in the shop front, but inside you can get a packet of 20 cigarettes for £1.50. Under the counter, of course. Everything you buy has got a film of dust on it. If you buy crisps, they're squashed pieces already. On this day, an old man is sat on a stool behind the counter, eating spice pickled out of a jar. His moustache seems to hang apart from his face, stiff as though sprayed with setting spray. A stocky man in a leather coat interrupts him. This man's about 30, and because of a childhood injury, he's got a smile that starts with his right nostril, and it kind of makes his face look like it's been whacked into place by a shovel. Ne haber beyefendi? What's up, my gentleman? Welcome, welcome. What's your name, my friend? Sadi, like my father. My name's Mehmet. My family own the shop opposite. You've seen it. Really? I've been over to introduce myself. They didn't mention they had a son. They do have a son, 5 actually. We're a big family. Well, I'm happy to meet you. Don't be a stranger. Funnily, I asked your parents over to mine already. Have a meal with us this Saturday. You should know the address. Yeah, we can all go together maybe. Where do you live? Please, you're all welcome. Happiness, all of you. We are just off here actually, Elsden. I'll write it before you go. Can I get you anything today? Grab something from the fridge? Thank you. The can of Mirinda's opened, Mehmet's beard bobbing with each glug. You know, some people have no hospitality left in them. Ugh, it's nothing, honestly. This place is almost like my son's business. I watch it for my neighbour. A good man. He wouldn't want a friend thirsty. Well, you're good to your neighbours. This kindness will return to you. A Muslim does not do one thing to get one thing back. Yes, but I can give you something back for a small piece. My business partners and me look after every shop in this area. Çok az gibi, such a little. You must know about us. We look after each other. Down the road, you got the cake shop, Ahmed's. They help us too. It's tax. Something like amusement showed in Sadi's face. There's a bit of pickled carrot stuck on his front tooth. The pickle jar, however, has been put away at some point between for a small piece and us. It's a dangerous area, Kardash. Some of the businesses around here only look out for their own. You got these gangs going after that young boy in the cafe down the road last week? Yeah, did you see the amount of traffic going after him? So many people trying to drive close so they could spot a friend in the crowds. Mehmet places his can in the bin by Sadi's feet. He comes eye to eye with Sadi's slippers, wet on the bottom from being worn outside. He's got small feet. Anyway, I see you're a family man. Well, my friends are all in this by blood, not by party tricks. You either go with us or you go with someone else. Nobody stays here for long on their own. Pay us 10% of what you make and we'll be fine. I'm not on my own. If you come back here, my own wife could run you off. You spend so long looking at people's feet, you don't check their hands. A sawn-off shotgun is propped under the counter. Sadi's aim is fixed anywhere between Mehmet's waist and his breastbone. Don't you care I had enough respect to come empty-handed? Just go. I'll see you when we come to eat. Elsden, is it? Hoşça kal. If you come, it will be to kiss my hand, sorry.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yours were lovely, by the way.
Huh?
Loved your question.
Oh, thank you so much. Anybody got any questions? Yeah.
So you're talking about how you enjoy going the timeline from like the 80s up until like the early 2010s. What do you imagine that Damla and her mother would be doing in 2021?
I imagine Ayla on a beach. She's got to be on a beach. She's got to have some type of mojito dancing on a beach somewhere. I think it's key actually that she has joy. And Damla, I think her life is not always in Tottenham here. And I think when I think about 2021, I think that a lot of what I've noticed about this year is the way that we circle back on different years in our life and have to reframe it and look back at it. So I definitely think, yeah, they would be in that process of unpicking and going back through things, especially with the way, I would hope I want my characters to be well, you know, I want them to be looked after and look after their minds.
Thank you so much. This was such an incredible conversation. I wanted to ask about like your approach to writing a novel. So, because you mentioned, you know, poetry, you mentioned into briefly, also like other genres of criticism. Like, even just from the conversation, it sounds so much like there's such a palpable, like, when you read from the first bit, there was a line that was like, adrenaline sits in your mouth, and I was like, the sensory nature of that is so beautiful. And then the film, the jump cut, kind of like implements is so palpable as well. So like, I guess my question is like, what or how would you describe the like interdisciplinarity that informs your work, or like how you are engaging with other forms and other genres, or mediums that might have like come into the book as well? Even like again, the Cabbage description is so beautiful, it's visual.
Thank you. I think that there is some sense that like with the English idea of what a novel is, that it has to stick to certain rules, and then you can ascend into the upper ranks, and it's great. And there's like these glowing orbs around you, and it's all very nice. But like the literature that I grew up looking at, definitely toyed with form. You know, poetry would have been by the by if you'd have seen it next to prose. You know, I read the poetry of Nesha Yassin when I was young, and my mum used to leave all these like amazing like things out, and like that she'd had from when she was back studying in Cyprus. And I think there's this thing of like, I'm grateful to have had other cultures to look into, to then help me bring in poetry, to think about music and to think about films. The middle section of the book, I kind of wanted to write it like a film script. I wanted it to feel like, you know those giant planning montages that you get in a really good crime movie, like Goodfellas or something, and then suddenly you zoom out and you go back in, it's like, okay, why don't I do this? I wanted to have that feeling as a form, you know, and that camera like doing this, doing that, deliberately doing a fake zoom in. I was saying this to you yesterday about email, I like the idea of doing fake zoom-ins where people think that it's true, and they think it's so specific that it must be real. And I like playing with that with my reader. Thank you.
Any other questions? There's one there.
I just wanted to say thank you again for the novel and for this. One thing that really struck me was your use of texture all the way through. All the way through the start of the book, you talk about oil so much, like food is a way of getting oil into your body, or even like the serrations of the knife in such a different context in the bit you read. And I was wondering if you could tell us more about like texture and feeling and like sensations and how you wrote that.
I mean, I'm a tourist. I love lingering. I love, if something's soft, I want you to know it's soft. Do you know what I mean? I want you to know. And I want like you to know that we're eating this food because it's gonna cleanse something here. It's gonna make you feel good. If someone gives you soup, the soup is to nourish you, you know, and that's, I think communities are these massive places of love, especially communities that exist in a situation of struggle. And so what's the nicest way to show that? I think textures. I think, you know, when we're thinking about, even when we're thinking about estates, for example, when we're looking at like the hard lines of concrete, there's something really lusciously smooth about them, and they keep people warm, and they, without them, they, you know, it's just would be awful at the same level. So it's like, I think about that too, like the way that we can split up textures and not just like think like concrete, that's hard, hits your head, you know. So we've got to try and think around like, but really, if you actually ask someone from an area, like, what do you think about this touch this, how does that feel? They're going to give you an answer that I think is often, it would surprise you. I mean, I get surprised by like people I speak to all the time. And, like, I'll say, oh, this is rubbish, don't you think? They'll be like, no, it's nice, like, I like this, or like vice versa. And like, we luxuriate in things in unexpected manners. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you so much for an incredible and just really tender series of readings and beautiful questions as well. and the listed such gorgeous answers. I was interested in your journey behind both naming the actual book, what led you to this brilliant title, Keeping the House, but also in terms of the way you delineated your chapters and the titles for your chapters. What came first, the chapter or the content? How did you think about the ways you located your reader at the beginning of the chapter? Because I think a lot of them are really interesting in depth. What came first?
The chapter titles didn't always come first, and sometimes they did. Sometimes I needed to give myself a prop to write something. If I wanted to write a love scene, I needed to give myself like a thing. So like I gave myself, this character standing in the rain, and then suddenly I could think, oh, rain, nice. With Keeping the House as a title, that came very early on, because for me, the title feels like this sense of attempting to keep order, attempting to keep a roof over your head, but also like the way that all of these various industries, it changes overnight. One day you think you got your house in order and the next you don't. And how do you keep your head on through that? Like how do you, like yesterday was all right. And so for me, that's how the title came in. We toyed with the idea of naming it Stuffed Cabbage or something more whimsical. Yeah, I didn't hate Stuffed Cabbage at all, but I think Keeping the House felt more emotionally resonant for me. And the working title that I always knew wasn't going to be the title was A Love Letter to Tottenham. And so I definitely wanted that to be felt within, and Keeping the House felt like the real title, getting at the heart of what A Love Letter to Tottenham could look like. Thank you.
I know Tish all the way back from my days on the writing board, and I remember at the time you saying that you were quite nervous about writing a book where your family and community might take against some of the content you're writing about. Now that you've written it, how do you think that they will take it?
I was thinking about that this morning, because I woke up this morning and my auntie, who I don't see her very much, lots of love for her, but I just don't see her very much, and I'm on my dad's side. And she's reading the book, and she's gotten really far in really quickly because the book arrived earlier than the 7th, yeah? And it's this thing of like, I didn't think anyone was going to read the book. I wrote it in this bubble, not thinking anyone was going to read it. And I'm very grateful for that, because I got to write things that I think are important to put to page. And now I'm just trying to like, really just back that this was said.
And then you meant it.
Yeah. So you got to like, I think if you're going to send something to publication, you got to look people in the eye. You have to. I think you've got to look people in the eye all the time, and I think all too often we're conditioned in society to like look away, to say sorry, to slow yourself down, to like try and curb your strangenesses. And so yeah, I'm trying to like make sure that with this book, with everything, look in the eye. Okay, I said it, it's done now. I paid my respects the way I wanted to do it, and I spoke to the people I felt like I needed to talk to, really. Hello.
Oh yes, sorry, right at the back. Sorry, I cannot see.
My sensitivity reader.
Second of all, the way, so I haven't finished the book for Ayla, and so far what I've read, it just feels like you're breathing, like, I know it's a cliche, but you're like breathing through the book, and like, there's even a bit where like, and it's very much you can hear like your presence, it's like your spirit, and it's like, oh, when you're saying, oh, like, this is the mom's, like, this is the mom's story, and it just like breathes into like some new paragraphs, and then the next chapter, and it's just like you're like immediately taken it like through your eyes, and it does kind of feel like someone's standing behind you, just like that. And yeah, I could just feel, obviously, like I could feel your spirit throughout it, and I just wanted to know like how would you describe like were there any kind of like spirits behind this, or like kind of like energies behind this? Like I don't know if that's a very clear question, but you know what I'm saying.
There are a whole host of spirits and energies behind this. Like, I would get to a point and I was like, I can't write this scene, and then I'd have to think about the purpose and reasons for why I wanted to write certain scenes, you know. As creators, we have to think about self-care. Sometimes you might not want to like produce a song or do this or that because it hurts, you know, to think and put yourself in that space. So I definitely, like, you know, I'd think about relatives, I'd think about loved ones, and just like imagine their energy carrying through. Something that really helped me was looking at photographs, you know, like even the cover photo, this type of thing, like being able to like look at friends and the like Lost in Tottenham's pictures, listen to music from my friends, and Annie, when she was like sending me poetry, that I think it was really just, I had people sending me things to help me to get through to the next spot. So there was this like emotional element of like feeling like spirits in the air looking after me. And then there was very much of this kind of, that sounds really kooky. I think we kind of experience, some people experience, I felt the presence of like loved ones when I was writing certain scenes. But yeah, like sometimes literally, here's a document for you that you can look at and it will help you and it will imbue an energy. If I said I wanted to feel sad, I would definitely get sad songs sent in by my friends and relatives. So my sister will send me like a bunch of stuff, like, it's just like, oh, this will gear you up, like, this will make you feel like you're in this rave, and yeah, it was really nice. Thank you.
Any last questions? No?
I've just spoken at you lot for so long, I really appreciate it. I'm just looking around the room like, right, you okay?
Thank you so much. Those questions were incredibly thoughtful. And yeah, it's been a joy, it's been a pleasure. Everybody buy the book, everybody read it. But thank you so much for being here. And thank you to Pages of Hackney as well for allowing us this space.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.